Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Hello and welcome to a brand new week of Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting to Jo about leaving her codependent marriage and finding her way back to herself, the journey of going inward to heal parts of herself, what happened to the relationships around her when her relationship with herself shifted, and defining what a healthy and happy relationship looks like now. But before we get into that, Sammy, what's been fueling you up this week?
Oh, I had a bit of a sad pants week.
Yeah, you did, didn't you?
Yeah. I have had, I guess what you would say are like depressive episodes across the course of my life. And last week was a few of those days back to back.
Yeah. I think you've definitely improved over time though. Like you haven't had one of these episodes for quite some time, so...
Yeah, the world was just feeling really heavy, and I don't know if I'm sure I'm not I know that I'm not the only one who has these feelings from time to time, but yeah, I've definitely got better. I've done a lot of mindset work. I've worked with coaches. I've worked with professionals, to help me better manage myself. But yeah, I really got swallowed for a few days last week, and I just become such a shell of a human being. Not much use to anybody else.
Yeah, you struggled for a couple of days.
Yeah. But so I guess the positive out of that, the fuel up, the thing that fueled me up was celebrating our anniversary.
I know, that was going to be mine too.
Well, we can share.
We can.
Yeah, so I was feeling very grey and very cloudy and very not great. Not great.
Yeah.
And I think it is a really hard line to allow myself to feel my feelings without falling into a deep, dark, black hole. Yeah, but you kind of helped me state change. And even though I wasn't in the best of headspaces, that we were still able to connect. And we had a really lovely date. And
yeah, we did have a really nice day.
Yeah, we cooked pasta from scratch together and sort of like did a little bit of reminiscing.
Yeah, had a delicious bottle of champagne.
Yeah. Yeah, and you delivered on my love language with some gifts, some beautiful, beautiful roses. They were stunning. Yeah, and I think it was also just the contrast of
feeling so shit during the day and then having a really nice evening and a really nice date.
Yeah, it was so nice. So thank you.
No worries. Yeah, and that was exactly what my fuel up was going to be. It was just enjoying our date together, and yeah, it is nice to cook some pasta and do some things that we wouldn't normally do, and and just spending some dedicated time to actually celebrate the relationship that we've built over the last 14 years.
Yeah, I absolutely love that we prioritize this. And for context, we celebrate 2 anniversaries. So we celebrate this one that we just celebrated, which was our the 14th anniversary of our very first kiss. And then we also still celebrate our wedding anniversary.
Yeah. For a couple of years, we did celebrate the anniversary that we got engaged, but we thought that was...
Yeah, I reckon we did it for like the year 1 year after, and then like maybe... Anyway, year 5, whatever. Yeah. But yeah, I love carving out time to celebrate us and our love and our relationship and connecting. And yeah, I think like anything that gets celebrated gets repeated. And loving us and our relationship and what we've created is, I think, worth celebrating.
It is.
Yeah, but my other fuel up, if I can just sneak in a second one, because I think I had like low lows and high highs last week, was the setting of the date, the saving of the date for our very first course launch.
I know, it's pretty exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you've been listening to the show for a little while, you've probably heard us talk little breadcrumbs.
Drop a few breadcrumbs.
Yeah, about what we've been building, about what we've been creating. But yeah, our flagship course, Couple and Team, is done, dusted, it's been test driven, and we've been given some incredible feedback, and we are so excited to start sharing it with you. But we've taken our decade or more of lessons in life and relationships and business and the things that we wish we had learned so much sooner, and we've bundled it all up into a course called Couple and Team. And it's for any couple who has decided that their relationship is a priority and they want to consciously take care of it so that they can create and keep a thriving relationship now and like well into the future. But yeah, it's really designed to help couples have some conversations that they probably didn't know that they needed to have. And some of the couples that we've had test drive it, we've had couples who are in like the very beginning, first few years of their relationship, and then couples who have been together for quite a few years and they've got kids and stuff. And even those couples are like, wow, we've just never talked about this before.
Yeah, getting massive impact out of it. So yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, so please excuse our little like plug here, but we're really excited to be sharing it. And yeah, if you're interested and want to jump on the wait list, you can do that at fuelcollective.com.au/courses.
But now, here's this week's guest.
Today we've got Jo Schonheim joining us. Jo was always an ambitious, independent and total people person, someone who measures her wealth by the quality of her relationships. As a little girl, Jo fantasized about being her own boss, not someone's wife. Despite her predictions of marrying late and possibly never having kids, by 23, Jo had married her best friend and lived across 3 continents. By 25, she was an award-winning entrepreneur, and by 32 was mother to a pair of whip-smart daughters. After growing up so fast, Jo found herself in a premature midlife crisis. Convinced that domestic bliss was wrought, she decided to start her life again. It took 4 years summoning the courage to end her 20-year codependent relationship to start a healthier one, this time with herself. During her intensive personal development, Jo had the epiphany that she had been outsourcing the heavy lifting of self-love to others, particularly men. So she set about restoring and building the internal infrastructure of self-referencing that she had lost along the way, along with losing her identity in the roles of wife and mother. Jo has since found love again, twice. First in the form of self-love, and as a result of that, her long-term relationship with her new partner, Darren. Today, professionally, she's a sales gun, and when she's not busy raining cash, you can find her in the boxing ring or hanging with her 2 sassy daughters. Jo is also fulfilling another lifelong dream of writing her very first book. It's all about how to identify and dismantle the shame around resenting modern motherhood, reclaiming your identity, and starting a life on your own terms, totally unapologetically. Welcome to the show, Jo.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for having me, Sammy and Nathan.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, what this bio doesn't say is that you and I know each other in the real world. Yeah, and I actually had the great pleasure of working alongside Jo and seeing her make that cash rain in a sales role.
I helped make you look good too.
Yes, you did. Yeah. Hey, so we've been pestering you for probably a year, probably since we started the podcast, to come and share some of your story. So before we even go there, I want to just honor and appreciate you and say thank you for joining us and having the willingness to share some of your story and your experiences with us.
Thank you.
So we're going to go like heavy straight in.
Dive straight in.
Yeah.
That's how Jo rolls.
Yeah. When did you first realize that your marriage wasn't going to be forever?
Ooh. I thought that was going to be a difficult question to answer, but actually I'd be kidding if I didn't admit that it was actually really simple. It was the moment that I realized that our values had diverged and that we were basically living in different orbits in terms of what was important to us. And the moment I had that realization, I just couldn't see myself for the next 60 years doing that. And the other epiphany that I had was realizing that I was standing inside a glass prison that I had built myself with my own 2 hands and that I was actually holding the keys.
Yeah. So how did you go about actually discovering, I guess, that your values were misaligned?
I had an incredible job, which is where I actually met Sammy, and that had really connected me to my values. And a lot of what we preached in the business was that your values have to align with what you do for a living and for everything that you do in your life, and that whenever you live outside of your values and you make decisions that are incongruent with that will literally eat you from the inside out. And that's the stuff that makes you lose sleep at night. So once I got really crystal clear on my values and started making decisions by them, things just they got harder before they got easier. I had to go through a lot of really difficult decisions to get to the point where now I make all of my decisions according to my values, and apply that lens over my decision. And then things just become really easy. So yeah, it was in that moment of realizing that there was an incongruence of my values, and then, yeah, getting really clear on those and prioritizing them for them to be non-negotiable.
Yeah. So give us some context. How old were your daughters when you had this light bulb?
So my daughters would have been 6.5, 7, and 10 and a half. And they were old enough to totally understand. And their response was really quite, I guess, shocking to some, in that they just were like, oh, really?
Very matter of fact.
Yeah. I think their friends were more surprised than they were, and they just saw that it would be for the best, and they accepted it. And like all kids, they just want to know how it affects their lives. And so that was one of the first things I addressed was, you'll have 2 different houses. Your friends will stay the same. You'll stay in the same school. You'll still do all the same extracurricular activities. You know, kids, their whole world revolves around themselves. And so they just want, kind of like a cat, they just want to know what's the change and impact going to be to their environment.
So what was it that took a few years between realizing that you weren't going to stay forever to actually leaving?
I think that concept of, it's like you don't quit on you can quit, but you don't quit on a hard day. And realizing that you have to have felt like you've really done everything, and that you've fought for it, and that you've taken the personal responsibility. You've asked yourself, what have I owned in the breakdown of this? Have I done everything in my power to turn this around? Have we gone to counseling together? That's super important. Are you both open to that? Because if only one person is, well, this came over. Both parties have to admit that they have a hand in it, and that it's both parties' responsibility. Marriages don't end because of one person. And yeah, I think, and that's why it took time, is that you have to have gone and tried everything and done the work and done the reframes and had the difficult discussions and trialed different things. And if after all of that, it's still, you can't find a way forward, well, then you have to be able to make peace with yourself. And I don't think you can make peace with yourself if you can't hand on heart say, I tried everything within my capacity at the time to salvage it. So for me, it was a long grieving process. And I've read some research about how a lot of the times women will raise the flag that a marriage is in crisis. And a lot of the times the other partner will be in denial about it and think, oh, it's not that bad. We'll have like date nights and, you know, they'll Band-Aid patch solutions and think that it's just a phase and that they'll get through it because they've gotten through all the other difficult things that they've been through. And, you know, the woman keeps running the flag up the pole going, no, like drowning over here, it's not working. We need to really take this seriously and we need to put in the work. And by the time the woman then leaves, oftentimes the partner is like, what? I didn't realize it was that bad. Why didn't you say something? And they're kind of like, you know, left in the lurch and then get very upset that the woman looks like as if she's already grieved and has moved on and started her new life and she seems like she's really happy, when in reality, the grieving was already done. It was preloaded. And so I remember, you know, my childhood best friend ended up splitting up with her partner around the same time as me, but it was a few months before. And I remember being on a family holiday in New York and knowing that I was coming back and that I would be moving out within a few weeks. And I said to her, please, please tell me that on the other side, this gets better because this is so unbearably difficult at the moment. I don't know if I've got the strength to do it. And she said, you just need to trust me. Your suffering is preloaded. You've already done 90% of the difficult stuff. Once you punch through to the other side, you'll see it just actually gets so much easier. You just have to have the faith.
And what you've just shared there was echoed by a recent guest, Siobhan Mullins, who is a divorce lawyer. And she talked about that same thing, about these cycles of grief and that women generally have started to move through them before the relationship has actually, you know, line in the sand. So yeah, that this, what appears to be healing quite quickly is not at all. It's just that the timelines didn't start at the same time.
Correct. Yeah. But that's part of the problem in the first place, right? Is that disconnect, the fact that you're not on the same page, which means you're not both facing reality and acknowledging the elephant in the room and then committing and doing the work to work on it together in tandem and grow together. Again, that's exactly where the disconnect starts to happen and the incongruence starts to really show up.
I mean, I've experienced that even just with some of my mates where they've like, and a relationship has ended and they've used like phrases like, oh, I was blindsided. I never saw it coming. Like, I just think like, how? Like,
living under a rock.
Yeah.
Were you not in the same house?
Yeah. So actually on that, you said, I think the words you used was like a glass container or a glass.
Living in a glass prison that you built yourself with your own two hands and you're standing inside holding the keys.
Yeah. So do you
just
think
to be precise?
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, it was
good
poignant.
Yeah.
Were you in that on your own or do you think he was holding the keys too?
I think I was definitely, it's almost irrelevant where he was. The point is I actually didn't realize that I was in a codependent relationship. And it wasn't until I left that I realized that I was in a codependent relationship because I think of myself as such a fiercely independent person that I'm like, what? Me, codependent? That's crazy. And I think, Sammy, even in our chats, when you and I became closer, I think part of me realizing that I was in a codependent relationship was in my conversation with you when you were talking about your relationship with Nathan and how you have such separate interests. And I was like, we're joined at the hip. We like do pretty much everything together. We've only just stopped going to the supermarket together. And which also meant that everything took twice as long because two people being applied to solving the same problem. And yeah.
That's a really rough, like, light bulb blind spot to realize, right? Where you're like your identity and the way that you see yourself, and then you have to question and go, oh, fuck, maybe that's not true.
Oh, I can't even tell you how devastating it was to realize just how much work I had ahead of me because I was so much further behind. That's not such a thing really as the finishing line, but I didn't quite realize just how much work was ahead and I realized that I had in that outsourcing of self-validation and self-love, the payoff, the secondary gain that I got for that was outsourcing the responsibility. And yeah, I had actually outsourced the responsibility to him for a lot of things as he had to me. And I realized that neither of us were actually adulting.
Mm.
Yeah. So that loss of sense of self, did that happen slowly over time? Or was it like that once you kind of got into that relationship, you just were so focused on each other that you kind of lost yourself then?
I lost myself actually really early on because I met him when I was 17 during my gap year. I wasn't even an adult. I was a kid. I was a freaking kid. And he was living overseas and had finished the army. And so, people grow up really fast when they're conscripted to the army by the age of 17, 18. And he was 3 years older than me as well. So I moved overseas to Israel when I finished university, which is where he's from. And that was the first time I'd ever lived out of home. I'd never had to fend for myself. I didn't even know how to vacuum or probably even run a dishwasher or clean a toilet or anything. And so I learned how to adult in my relationship with him. And in doing so, I didn't actually form the skills to be able to adult on my own. And I thought that having a really close relationship and being best friends was all about the fact that you do everything together. I thought that being inseparable was what you should aspire to. And so I guess our values were quite different from the beginning. I've always been into personal development, him not so much. And so a whole lot of things like that I stopped doing because I knew that wasn't something he was into. He didn't really have terribly much respect or interest in it. And I think I kind of morphed myself and we just became this one blurred version of each other. And then became a business owner by the time I was 25, had my first kid by the time I was 29, 30. And then you take on this whole role of being a mother and, you wake up approaching 40 and you're just like, fuck, who am I? Who is this person? And you realize that, and you don't even know where to begin. That's the scariest thing. You're so disconnected from who you are and what you believe in and what your values are that, again, you just don't even know where to begin to do the work.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's actually the next question. Where did you start?
Where did I start? I think I started without realizing that I was starting. And I think, without going into too much detail, I think I started by trying to burn the whole thing down. I think it was like a Thelma and Louise moment of like driving over the edge of the cliff, and you're not sure, at the end of the movie, you don't know whether they crashed and burned or whether they magically, miraculously managed to, assumed
survive or parachute out of there.
Yeah, or emerge from the ashes. You don't know, but it's kind of like, and people get very upset about bushfires. Yes, there's death and destruction, but point of fire is renewal. And I think I subconsciously realized that the only way to bring about change was to force change. And I realized that it wasn't something that could be fixed. You couldn't go and like repair a window or like hang the door back on the hinges because it was a little bit off kilter. The whole thing needed to be dismantled and to just be built from scratch. So I'd say I first started in probably a very destructive way. And my instinct was that I had to kind of burn it down in order to renew. Once I realized that that was
maybe not sustainable,
probably not sustainable, and also living outside my values, because I stopped recognizing myself. I was like, who is this person? This isn't how I would behave. These aren't my values. And I came across a really inspiring, I think it's from Tony Robbins, but it was through another coach that I had been chatting to, which was about the 6 core needs, about how needs trump values. And so if your needs aren't being met, you'll find a way to meet them. And there are productive ways and there are less productive ways. So yeah, I had employed a bunch of unproductive ways. And then I realized that that doesn't make me a terrible person and I'm not my behavior. I just need to find a healthier way to meet those needs. And then I read a book by an incredible man called Jamin Fraser. And it was his first book called Elegant Solutions to Complex People Problems. And it was in that book that I had that epiphany of standing inside the glass prison that I built myself, and I was holding the keys. And this whole concept of like, but how could I leave? Where would I even begin to start again? I started to realize that that was all just a story that I'd told myself. And actually, I was incredibly fortunate and did have the skills and resources and the means to be able to start again. All I had to do was decide and then commit. It was 100% a choice.
I had some proximity to you at this time when you pulled the trigger and it was like dominoes. It was like, and it was amazing. It was amazing. And I felt like you were very empowered by a lot of the decisions you were making and doing a lot of things, like, as you said, on your own for the first time as a 40-something. Like, that is fucking wild, right? Because the easy decision would have been, it may not have been like comfortable, but the easy decision would have been to stay.
Absolutely. Especially, and this was part of the guilt, right? I was married to a really good man and I still love him and I'll always love him. He'll always be my family. And so you think to yourself, what a luxury to sit there and say, oh, I think I could be happier. Like when you have a roof over your head, you have someone that does love you, that is loyal, that has always been there for you, has stuck through with you through all the hard stuff, who knows everything about you and still loves you, and you're still so connected and do get on, thankfully, not a victim of, domestic abuse or financial control or a myriad of those other things. And so you then say to yourself, like, kind of how spoiled are you that you want to leave that? Like, a lot of women would, I wouldn't say kill for that, but would really see huge value in that and would never want to leave that.
I really like what you just said there, because you're describing something that the author Eli J. Finkel talks about in the book, The All or Nothing Marriage. And this idea that you can go for a really lovely Sunday stroll together and get a pretty good view, and it will be nice and it will be pleasant and you'll enjoy it. But you don't have to climb over any rocks. You don't have to scale any sides of mountains, and it's not particularly challenging. But if the two of you in your relationship and in your marriage decide, you know what, we're going for the summit and we want the all marriage, we want everything, we want to grow together, we want to work through the challenges, we want to scale scale the mountain so that we can be rewarded with that truly epic view. There's a difference. And if there's two people in a relationship or in a marriage and one wants the easy stroll and the other wants the summit, there's going to be that disconnect no matter how good that Sunday stroll version looks to anybody else.
Amen.
Yeah.
That is exactly it. And I actually said in our dinner that I took us to in my closing remarks, as in the discussion that was the nail in the coffin in terms of this is over.
The beginning of the end.
The beginning of the end, exactly, was I was like, listen, I have every intention of living to at least 100. The feisty ones always last the longest or very often. So I reckon I'm going to be one of those. And these were my actual words. I said, we can continue to limp for the next 60 years. Absolutely, we can do that. But I was not put on this earth, nor do I want to spend the next 60 years limping from one life event to the next. Because that's also the excuse often, right? Which is because we were about to do this massive trip for a month to the US and to Canada. And it was like, it'll be a family thing. And, there's always kids' birthdays and jobs. And we've just moved to a brand new house, blah, blah. There'll always be
life.
It'll never be convenient. There'll never be, this is the window to do it. It'll always be painful. And I was like, I'm just not willing to limp from one life event to the next. 60 years is a really long time and a very short time. And I want to make the absolute best of them. And I don't think that we're growing together anymore. And I don't think that we like ourselves anymore. I feel like I'm the worst person in the world when I'm with you. And if I do a temperature check of all the other people in my world, according to the majority, I'm not a horrible person. But in these four walls, apparently I am. And if giving my best and being the best version of a wife that I know how equals me still being a horrible person, well, then I'm not the wife for you and you deserve better than this. So if I do make you so unhappy, why would you want to stay with me? And if neither of us feel good about ourselves, it doesn't matter how much love we have for the other. If we don't love ourselves in this relationship, how is this healthy? Why would you want to sustain this?
Yeah, that's a big thing that we talk about at Fuel Collective is this idea that, your relationship with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship that you have.
Exactly. And I had realized that in my marriage, whilst in the time that I had been committed to the relationship, I had sold out and been disloyal to myself. I had betrayed myself. And so that's why when I went and did my unproductive ways of burning it down, it was my way of rebelling because I was trying to reclaim a patch of land for me and trying to put my stake in the ground because I had never done that.
All while still being a parent and a functioning human in society, contributing and making the wheels turn and the dominoes continue to fall over.
Yeah. And showing up to work with incredible energy and helping other people. And that was also the thing. I was sitting here championing all these other people from the sidelines about them going out and fulfilling their ambitions and their potential and them living their truth, whilst inside that was the furthest thing from what I was doing. But I also realized that in that role, it was the perfect place to hide because my job was to connect with really respectful, insightful curiosity into unpacking other people's stories. And the reason why that served me so well at the time is it allowed me to take focus off of me because the subject of the story was not me, it was them. And so I got to deflect and not have to deal with my pain because I could sit there and shine the light on furthering and championing them.
So what was the shift in yourself and your self-love once you actually started rediscovering who you were as a person?
So, it took me a long time to realize things like that I had been in a codependent relationship, that relationship was actually toxic. It wasn't intended on being toxic, but that's how it turned out to be. That I wasn't nearly as independent as I thought I was, that I had been externally validating my whole life, that I had been, and I think this conversation actually happened with a chat that you and I had, Sammy, where I had an epiphany where I was like, oh my God, I have been literally outsourcing the heavy lifting to other people. And it had dawned on me that I'd been primarily doing that with men, and that I had assigned them to be the issuers of gold stars. So, and that's part of what drove me so much in terms of my work. And when I am a typically high achieving, career oriented woman, when you're so used to being rewarded for your intellectual ability and your ability to produce outcomes, which obviously make other people happy and serve their dreams, then you get a gold star. And every time you achieve and hit one of those goals, you get another gold star and another gold star and another gold star. And that becomes addictive, and it becomes an incredibly powerful strategy that works until it doesn't. And I realized that I had outgrown that strategy. But if you took away that scaffolding, there wasn't really much internally in terms of that internal infrastructure of, well, if I'm not a high achieving career woman, and I've always struggled with defining myself as being a mother because I have associated that with being low value because society doesn't value it. So you're faced with the stark reality of, well, then who am I and what is my worth? And having that realization that my achievements do not equal my worth was huge. So even if I had missed my sales targets, realizing that who I am and what I represent and the value that I put out into the world, that doesn't make any difference.
Those two are not correlated.
Those two things are not correlated. Whereas in my head, those things were directly correlated. And so realizing that that had been the strategy that I'd been employing, and that it was nobody's responsibility to issue gold stars, especially men, and that that was my job. And I guess the whole work of reparenting yourself. And when young people today talk about they struggle to adult, I think really what they're referencing and they can't put their finger on is that they realize that they're still looking to their parents, for example, or people that they respect or mentors to tell them what to do and to give them cues and validation of whether they're doing it right or not and whether they're taking responsibility, whereas that's your work to do. And so it wasn't until I started the process of reparenting and realizing that I was the gold star issuer. And I remember, Sammy, when you and I first met and people would give me compliments and say, oh, you're so whatever. And I'd be like, really? Wow. And then I would get really emotional. And now if someone paid me a lovely compliment, I would just say, thanks. Great. Like, it's actually none of my business whether they think I'm good or great or smart or whatever. It's irrelevant. Just as if they thought I was terrible and they disagreed with every viewpoint I had and they wanted to create a voodoo doll and stick pins in it with my name on it, that's also none of my business.
I feel so grateful, and I'm not sure what the right word is, but like that I've had proximity for your caterpillar to butterfly kind of transformation, because it's been messy and beautiful and messy and beautiful. I am really grateful that you're here sharing with us and listeners. But you've talked a lot about like doing the work. I want to know, like, what did you do? What were you doing?
So first of all, I realized that I had been waiting for permission. And that permission was always, again, someone else. And again, typically a man that had to give me permission. And then back to the point that I had made a while ago, which was that personal development was always really important to me. And I gave that up at the beginning of my relationship because that wasn't valued by my partner. And so I gave myself permission to go back to what I loved, which was personal development, to go and buy up all the books, do lots of reading. For the first time in my life, I invested in myself and I paid for coaching, which again, something I'd never afforded myself. I always thought that was indulgent because I realized it was the most important, valuable problem to solve. And that once I had solved that problem, all the other problems would become infinitely easier. But that's where everything stemmed back to. And until I had learnt to do the heavy lifting myself, to become the gold star issuer, to realize I don't need permission from anyone other than me. No one else's opinion of me is my business. and getting really clear and non-negotiable on my values. Until I had done that work, everything else was going to be like pushing shit uphill.
So once you became your gold star issuer for yourself, how did that shift your relationships with the people around you?
Oh, massive, massive impact. Really what that's connected to is the same idea and energy around how power is never taken. Power is only ever relinquished. And so when you stop, because that's what power is, right? Power is when you need something from someone else. That's the only time they can have power over you, is if you need something from them. So in my previous strategy of needing their permission or needing their validation and therefore always seeking that, that means I was constantly on the back foot where they had power over me because they had something that I desperately, desperately needed. So once I decided that I no longer needed that from them, there's no power imbalance. I'm standing in my power in every decision that I make. And what comes with that is 100% responsibility. And even that, right? Like thinking that we get to choose or opt in and out of taking responsibility is total bullshit. The responsibility was always ours. It always will be ours. But the trade-off for that and what you get in return is the fact that you get 100% power then, because you're taking full responsibility and you don't relinquish power to anyone.
That radical responsibility piece is massive. Like you talking about like, oh my God, the realization that I'm holding the keys and I've created this fucking mess that I am not happy in. And you know what? I also can create a totally different reality.
Correct. I can build a new story for myself.
Yeah. So you worked with a coach, you reinvested in yourself, and you went about changing the things that you didn't want in your life anymore, or the way that they were in your life. Where are you now?
Great question. So I am staying true to my values, which are growth, connection, and truth. I operate entirely from that lens, and they are non-negotiable. I actually pretty much turned down a job today because I could see from the conversation that there was going to be a total misalignment of values. And I now know well enough that when you ignore those spidey senses, do so at your own peril, and that you know that it's not going to end well. I am in a relationship coming up on 16 months with someone who on paper I never would have dated in the past. I would have dated high-flying CEOs and directors and people who were incredibly academic and had followed a similar career path to me. But we're so connected and in sync with each other from a values perspective and are so committed to growing together and most importantly, growing as individuals and both of us doing the work and just having such, I wouldn't use the word brutal, such pure honesty with each other and the communication that we have with each other and supporting each other. But also what's really beautiful is, to answer your question, I now see myself as a single woman who has a partner, which I know sounds crazy. Like, don't those two things cancel each other out? But they actually don't. And I realize why I'm very specific about those words. I'm a single person, a single woman, because I have my own life. I have my own home. I have my own hobbies, my own interests, the way that I do things. And I have a partner who complements that and who runs their life in parallel to mine. And we intersect at times, but we do have, it's kind of like an infinity symbol. It's the flow of energy and you intersect in the middle and you weave back in and out and in and out. But we very specifically are big on our relationships with ourselves so that when we do intersect and come together, we're truly there in service to each other with so much love, but neither of us define ourselves by our relationship. And that's why I say I'm a single woman who has a partner.
And that piece that you described so eloquently about standing in your own power, if the two of you are both doing that and you don't need each other and it's purely a choice and you're both still choosing it, it's beautiful.
Exactly. And I was thinking about that, about how how do we continue to date forever? And I realized that we very consciously choose to be in love and stay in love and show each other that love. And we're very cognizant of not taking each other for granted and getting too comfortable with each other. And the analogy that came to mind was, even your favorite trackies will eventually get holes.
Yep.
And I don't want our relationship to ever be that favorite pair of trackies. People describe, they're like a pair of my favorite old slippers. I don't ever want to be someone's pair of old fucking smelly shoes. Thanks very much. No thanks.
Yeah. I want to be taken out on good occasions and well cared for and taken to the dry cleaner.
Exactly. So, when we're together, we don't sit on our phones. We hardly ever watch Netflix together. When we're together, we make that time really, really count.
Yeah, I love that.
I think that's underestimated. Even just the attitude of deciding how you want to be together.
Totally. And our attitude is that we're lovers.
Not lazy Netflix binging, comfortable slippers.
Exactly. We're lovers. We both have kids. We don't have the desire to be a Brady Bunch. I think we're more likely to get married than we are to live together anytime soon. And, I already spent 20 years in a relationship where we ended up being like project managers. I don't ever want to fucking project manage again, like with my partner. So our whole energy in our relationship is that we are dating and that we're lovers. But yeah, I'd say we're committed to the future together with the intention of being forever. But that's, it's a conscious choice. It's a conscious resubscribing.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Resubscribe, opt in.
Exactly. It's a constant opt-in.
Yeah.
Hey, Jo, as we close this out, I would love to know, what is your big number one top tip for keeping a relationship fueled up? And I'll let you answer it, whether or not you want to answer it from the sense of keeping a relationship with yourself fueled up or a relationship with a romantic partner fueled up.
I think I already answered the question about how I keep the romantic relationship fueled up, which was to not take each other for granted. So I think it's actually I'd be more of value to our listeners to share a tip on how to maintain the relationship with yourself. This has been a really big thing for me, which is to prioritize myself. I have a total tendency to lose myself in a relationship because once I commit to something, I'm like all in. I'm totally drinking from the Kool-Aid. I'm an evangelist. I'll be their biggest ambassador and champion. And I definitely have a tendency to lose my identity and to converge. So for me, the biggest tip is to have clear boundaries, to commit to them, to realize that when you commit to yourself, that is committing to your partner, and that to be with a partner and to choose a partner that respects those boundaries, that encourages you and champions you when you do protect those boundaries, because they realize how important it is. So for example, both of us we have our sports. I'm into martial arts. He's into cycling. And we know how important our training is. And so we will never allow the other one to cancel training in order to see each other. And if we do, it's something that's very, very rare, and it's treated as something that's precious and special because we know how important it is. Because when we stop looking after ourselves, when we stop investing in ourselves, then it goes from being something that was positive into something that you will eventually end up resenting, because then it starts to turn into sacrifice. So that would be my top tip, is to get clear on your boundaries, to commit to them, to prioritize them, and to never, ever feel bad for doing that.
Yeah, amazing.
So good, Jo. So good.
Did you just issue me a gold star? Because if you did, it's none of my business, and I'm going to politely hand it back.
I'll keep it.
You can keep it.
There's been so much good shit in this chat. Thank you so much for going there with us and, embracing the lessons that you've learned and sharing them so willingly and so openly.
Thank you. Well,
we don't take this conversation lightly, and we appreciate you for sharing some really bright and light days, but some kind of dark ones too.
Thank you. Well, I figure if even one person out there can gain something or gain some courage from listening to my story, and it helps reframe some of the stories they've been living out of, then for me, it was worth it. So thank you guys for the opportunity.
Yeah, and to honour that, thank you, we've provided a student in Indonesia with a week's worth of classroom education. This project's looked after by Friends of National Parks Foundation in Indonesia, but one of the great things about this project is that it's for girls. So quite often girls don't get to go to school, but with this project they do. So thank you so much for being the change and allowing us to be the change in the world too.
Thank you so much. You guys are the best.
No worries. So Jo, if people want to connect with you, how should they do that?
Probably the easiest way would be to find me on LinkedIn with my full first name, which is Joanne, Joanne. And yeah, hit me up and can slide into my DMs.
Dude, she's great.
Thanks so much, Jo.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.